Have you ever stopped to think that every second that passes may not actually be passing the way you imagine, and that perhaps the past, present, and future are happening simultaneously at this very moment, and that everything you consider to be time flow is just an illusion created by your limited consciousness trying to make sense of a reality much stranger and more disturbing than any science fiction has ever dared to imagine? Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of the most influential astrophysicists and most brilliant science communicators of our era, has shared with the world a truth about time that defies everything we have been taught since we were children. A revelation so profound and disconcerting that many people simply refuse to accept, even when faced with the overwhelming evidence of modern physics. And this truth is not just an academic curiosity confined to laboratories and university blackboards, but something that fundamentally redefines what it means to exist, what it means to have memories, what it means to plan for the future, and even what it means to be alive in this moment you call now. The revelation is this: time as you experience it does not exist in the way you think it does. And when you truly understand the implications of this, when you delve into the discoveries of Einstein's relativity, thermodynamics, quantum physics, and modern cosmology, you realize that your most basic intuition about reality is fundamentally wrong. Tyson often begins his explanations with a simple but devastating question: what is now? When you say something is happening now, what exactly do you mean? If you are on Earth and a friend is on Mars, do you share the same thing now? Physics' answer is a resounding and absolutely baffling no, because what happens now on Earth could be happening in Mars' past or Mars' future, depending on how you and your Martian friend are moving relative to each other. And this is not science fiction or philosophical speculation. It is physics experimentally verified millions of times with absurd precision. And if you are one of those who love unraveling the deepest mysteries of reality like me, subscribe to the channel because we have many more fascinating and disturbing scientific revelations about the nature of the universe to share with you. Revelations that will blow your mind and completely transform the way you see every second of your existence. The journey we are about to take is not comfortable, it is not reassuring, but it is absolutely true, and incredibly freeing when you finally accept it. So get ready, because once you understand what I am about to reveal to you about time, you will never look at a clock the same way again. You will never think about your memories the same way again. And you will never again assume that the present you are experiencing is something universal and shared by all conscious beings in the cosmos. The history of our understanding of time begins long before Neil deGrasse Tyson or even Albert Einstein. It begins with Isaac Newton at the end of the 17th century when he proposed that there is an absolute time that flows uniformly throughout the universe independent of anything else. A universal cosmic clock marking the seconds identically everywhere in space. And this idea made perfect intuitive sense because that is exactly how time seems to work in our everyday experience. For Newton, you could perfectly synchronize all the clocks in the universe, and they would remain synchronized forever, ticking off the same second, minutes, and hours in perfect harmony. And the past was definitely past, the future was definitely future, and the present was an instantaneous universal moment shared by everyone and everything simultaneously. This Newtonian view of absolute time reigned supreme for over 200 years and seemed so obviously correct that to question it would be like questioning whether water is wet or whether fire is hot. But then came 1805, and a young physicist named Albert Einstein, working in a patent office in Bern, Switzerland, began thinking about light, about motion, about what it really means for two events to happen simultaneously. And what he discovered shook the very foundations of physics. Einstein realized something that seems simple but has terrifying consequences. The speed of light in a vacuum is always the same for all observers, regardless of how fast those observers are moving. Always exactly 299,792.458 kilometers per second. Not a bit faster and not a bit slower. Now you may be thinking, so what's the problem with light having a constant speed? The reason is that for the speed of light to be constant for all observers, regardless of their movement, something else needs to vary, and that something is time itself. If you are standing still and I am moving at close to the speed of light relative to you, for us to both measure light traveling at the same speed, time literally needs to pass slower for me than for you. It's not that my watch is broken or that I am perceiving time differently. Time itself is flowing at different rates for both of us. Einstein published this in 1955 in his article on special relativity, and the scientific world was shocked, confused, and many simply didn't believe it. But then experiments began to confirm each crazy prediction of this theory one by one. Take muons, subatomic particles created when cosmic rays hit the Earth's upper atmosphere. These particles live on average just 2.2 microseconds before decaying, so even traveling close to the speed of light, they should decay long before reaching the Earth's surface. But we detect thousands of them at sea level every day. Why? Because for muons traveling at 99.9% the speed of light, time is passing much more slowly. From their point of view, the journey from the upper atmosphere to the ground takes only a fraction of a microsecond. But from our point of view, standing still on Earth, they exist long enough to complete the journey because their time is dilated. This has been measured, verified, confirmed thousands of times. And today, our GPS systems wouldn't work if we didn't constantly correct for the time dilation of satellites in orbit that experience time flowing slightly differently than we do here on the surface. But Einstein didn't stop at special relativity. He kept thinking, and in 1915 he presented general relativity, an even more disturbing theory that revealed that it's not just motion that affects time, but gravity too. The stronger the gravitational field, the slower time passes. So if you are near a black hole where gravity is extremely intense, time literally freezes compared to someone far away in empty space. And this means that two observers in different gravitational fields not only experience time at different rates, they literally inhabit different presents, different nows, and there is no objective way to tell which one is right, because they are both equally correct from their own perspectives. Neil deGrasse Tyson loves to use the example of twins to illustrate this. Imagine two 20-year-old identical twin brothers. One stays on Earth, and the other travels in a spaceship at 90% the speed of light to a distant star and back. When the astronaut twin returns, he is 25 years old, but his brother, who stayed on Earth, is 60 years old. And this is neither a paradox nor a trick. It is literally what would happen because time passed more slowly for the moving twin. The two brothers have experienced different amounts of time, lived in different amounts of present moments, aged at different rates, and both are correct in their own experiences of reality. Now let's dive into the part that really challenges everything you think you know about existing in time. The revelation that Neil deGrasse Tyson finds so profound that he sees people literally refusing to accept it, even when presented with the mathematics and experiments that prove it. If there is no universal present, if different observers in different states of motion or different gravitational fields experience different presents and different pasts and different futures, then what really exists? Modern physics' answer is disturbing. Everything exists simultaneously. There is a concept called the block universe or block universe that emerges directly from Einstein's relativity equations, and this view suggests that the past, present, and future all exist equally and simultaneously as a four-dimensional block, where time is just another dimension like height, width, and depth. Think of it like this. You can move back and forth in space. You can walk 5 steps forward and then 5 steps back. But you can't do that with time, because your consciousness is stuck moving in one direction along the temporal dimension. But that doesn't mean that the past has ceased to exist, or that the future doesn't yet exist. It just means that your conscious awareness is limited to experiencing one moment at a time in that temporal dimension. Imagine a film. All the frames of the film exist simultaneously on the film, or in the digital file. The first frame does not cease to exist when you watch the 10th frame, and the 1000th frame already exists. Before you start watching, your experience of watching the film frame by frame in sequence creates the illusion of flow and change, but all the frames simply exist timelessly. The block universe suggests that reality is like this. All moments of time from the Big Bang to the end of the universe exist as different slices of the same four-dimensional reality, and your journey through time is just your consciousness moving through these slices, experiencing one after the other. Tyson often mentions that this means that the you of 5 years ago still exists in one slice of space-time. The you of 10 years ago already exists in another slice, and the you of now is just one of infinite versions of you distributed throughout the temporal dimension. This discovery impacted scientists around the world as they began to really absorb its implications. And I wonder, where are you watching it from now? Comment your city or country. It's incredible to think that we are all connected in this same universe, trying to understand it better, and that while you are reading this in your present moment, I am in a slightly different present moment, creating this content, and yet in some strange way we both exist in different temporal slices of this same cosmic reality. But there's more. There's much more. Because if the block universe is correct, what happens to concepts like change, choice, and free will? If the future already exists in the same way as the past, if all moments exist simultaneously, then in what sense do you really make choices? In what sense is the future open and not determined? Tyson is not afraid to face this disturbing question, and he honestly admits that physics does not offer a comfortable answer. The block universe view suggests that from a timeless perspective outside of time, everything that will happen has already happened, or is happening, or has always existed, depending on how you want to phrase it. But from within time, from your limited perspective of consciousness, moving through the temporal dimension frame by frame, you experience choice. You experience uncertainty about the future. You experience the feeling that the past is fixed, but the future is malleable. Physicists and philosophers debate furiously whether these two perspectives are compatible, whether it is possible that everything is determined in the block universe, but that we still have some genuine form of choice, or whether the feeling of free will is an illusion created by not having access to future temporal slices. Now, let's add another layer of weirdness: the arrow of time. You've probably noticed that time seems to have a direction. You can remember the past, but not the future. You see eggs break but never spontaneously come back together. You see hot coffee cool, but cold coffee never heat up on its own. You grow old but never rejuvenate. All of this points to a fundamental asymmetry between past and future that we call the arrow of time. But here's what's absolutely maddening. The fundamental laws of physics are almost all time reversible. If you filmed two atoms colliding and then ran the film backwards, what you would see would be perfectly consistent with the laws of physics. There is nothing in the fundamental equations that says time must flow in one direction rather than another. So where does the arrow of time come from? The answer lies in a concept called entropy, which is basically a measure of disorder or randomness in a system. The second law of thermodynamics says that the entropy of a closed system always increases with time. Organized systems tend to become disorganized. Concentrated energy tends to disperse. Structure tends to turn into chaos. And it is this constant increase in entropy that creates the arrow of time that we experience. But here's the real mystery that keeps physicists up at night. Why was entropy so low in the early universe? The Big Bang was an extremely low entropy state, extremely organized in a sense, and everything since then has been a gradual increase in entropy. But why did the universe start out in this special low entropy state instead of already being at maximum entropy? No one knows for sure, and this question is at the heart of the arrow of time problem. Neil deGrasse Tyson likes to point out that if you could somehow reverse all the movements of all the particles in the universe, theoretically entropy could decrease and time could flow backwards. You would see eggs reassembling, coffee warming itself, people rejuvenating, and this would be perfectly consistent with the fundamental laws of physics. The only problem is that it is statistically almost impossible for this to happen spontaneously because there are vastly more ways for a system to be disorganized than organized. Think of it this way. There are only a few ways, a bara. Most of the cards are in perfect order. But there are trillions of ways they can be shuffled. So when you shuffle an ordered deck, you are essentially allowing it to explore this vast space of disordered states, and the chances of it spontaneously returning to the ordered state are absurdly small. So small that you could shuffle decks for the entire age of the universe and never see it happen. It is this statistical asymmetry that creates the illusion that time has a direction, but fundamentally, time itself has no arrow. It is us and the universe in constant increase in entropy that create the experience of temporal directionality. So let's now explore what all this means for our existence, for how we think about identity, memory, responsibility, and purpose. If the block universe is correct, and all moments exist simultaneously, then you are not moving through time, you are distributed throughout time like a four-dimensional worm that stretches from the moment of your birth to the moment of your death. Each version of you in each moment is equally real and exists permanently in that particular slice of space-time. The you reading this now exists forever in this moment. The you of yesterday forever exists in that moment. And the you of tomorrow already exists in tomorrow's moment. This completely transforms what it means to die. Because if all moments exist timelessly, then the moments when you were alive continue to exist, even after your consciousness has stopped moving through new moments. Your temporal worm simply stops extending, but all the parts of it that ever existed continue to exist in the four-dimensional structure of space-time. Tyson sometimes mentions that this offers a strange form of solace about mortality. You never truly cease to exist because you have always existed and will always exist in the moments you occupied. What ends is just the extension of your temporal worm into the future. But this also raises deep questions about identity. If each momentary version of you is a separate entity existing in a separate slice of space-time, then in what sense are you the same person you were as a child? Your atoms have all been replaced multiple times. Your memories have been constantly rewritten. Your personality has changed. And now we discover that every instant of you exists independently in its own time slice. So what exactly is the you that persists through time? Many philosophers argue that personal identity is a useful illusion, a narrative that your mind constructs to make sense of the succession of mental states you experience, but that there is actually no essential permanent self that travels through time. What exists is a causal chain of physical and mental states, each emerging from the previous one, and your sense of being a unified, continuous self is merely the result of cognitive processes that connect these different temporal slices into a coherent story. What about your memories? You probably think of memories as records of the past, like mental photographs of things that happened, but modern neuroscience has revealed that memories don't work like that. Every time you access a memory, you reconstruct it, and in the process, you potentially modify it, add details, remove details, distort colors and emotions. Your memories are constantly rewritten every time you recall them. This means that the past you carry in your mind is not a faithful recording of what actually happened. It is a constantly updated reconstruction, shaped by both who you are now and who you were then. And if the past in the block universe exists fixedly and timelessly, then the past in your mind is something completely different. A creation of the present that has only an approximate and constantly changing relationship to the actual events that are crystallized in the fabric of space-time. Neil deGrasse Tyson points out that this has implications for concepts like responsibility and justice. If you punish someone today for something they did 10 years ago, you are punishing a version of that person who exists in a completely different slice of space-time. The person who exists now is physically and mentally different from the person who committed the crime. So, on what basis do you attribute responsibility through time? Our intuition is that there is an ongoing self that persists, and is therefore responsible for its past actions. But the more you examine this in light of modern physics and neuroscience, the more this intuition appears to be a useful simplification, but not a profound truth about reality. Think about free will again. If the future already exists in the universe block, if your choices tomorrow are already determined and existing in a future slice of space-time, then, when you deliberate a decision now, what exactly is happening? Are you discovering what choice already exists in the future, or are you creating that choice? The distinction seems to make sense from the point of view of consciousness moving through time, because you don't have access to future slices. So from your perspective, the future is genuinely open and uncertain, but from a timeless perspective outside of time, looking at the entire block universe at once, your choices have always existed along with all of their consequences. Physicists like Sean Carroll argue that there is no contradiction here, that free will can be compatible with determinism if you define it properly. Free will does not mean that your choices are random or that they emerge out of nowhere. It means that your choices emerge from your own mental processes of deliberation and reasoning rather than being imposed by external coercion. And this can be true even in a deterministic universe where all your deliberations and choices already exist timelessly in the space-time block. Others like Sabine Hossenfelder are more skeptical and argue that free will, as commonly conceived, is incompatible with what we know about physics, that the sense of agency and choice is an evolutionarily useful illusion, but does not reflect the underlying reality of a universe governed by deterministic physical laws. The debate continues, and will probably continue for a long time, because it touches on the deepest questions about what it means to be human, to have conscience, to make choices, and to be responsible for one's actions. And there's another layer of weirdness when you consider quantum mechanics, because in the quantum realm, time behaves in even stranger ways. Delayed quantum erasure experiments have shown that decisions you make in the present appear to be able to retroactively affect what happened in the past. Particles appear to exist in superpositions of multiple states, until they are observed, at which point the state collapses into a defined reality. And there are interpretations of quantum mechanics, such as the many worlds interpretation, that suggest that each quantum decision creates branches of the universe where all possible outcomes each occur in their own separate timeline. If the many worlds interpretation is correct, then there is not a single universe block, but infinite constantly branching universe blocks. And at every moment you are dividing yourself into countless versions, each experiencing different outcomes of quantum events, which makes the question of what happens to you through time even more confusing and dizzying. Tyson sometimes comments that he prefers not to think too much about the philosophical implications of quantum mechanics, because they can drive you crazy if you really try to internalize what they would mean for your experience of being a unique individual with a single timeline. But as a scientist, he recognizes that reality can be much stranger than anything our evolved intuition for dealing with predators and collecting berries on the African savanna can comfortably comprehend. And now, Let me reveal perhaps the most disconcerting part of all this, something that Neil deGrasse Tyson constantly emphasizes, but that most people can't really accept emotionally, even when they understand it intellectually. There is no universal now. There is no shared cosmic present. When you say now, you are only referring to your own local present moment, which is different from the present moment of anyone else who is in motion, relative to you, or in a different gravitational field. And that difference is not small or negligible on scales. Cosmic. When you look at Andromeda, our neighboring galaxy located 2.5 million light-years away, what are you seeing now? You're seeing light that left Andromeda 2.5 million years ago, so you're literally looking 2.5 million years into Andromeda's past. But what's Andromeda's present? What's happening now there? The disturbing answer is that there is no single objective answer. Depending on your relative motion relative to Andromeda, Andromeda's now that corresponds to your now here on Earth could be anywhere from thousands of years in the future to thousands of years in Andromeda's past, depending on whether you are moving toward Andromeda or away from it. This is called the relativity of simultaneity, and is a direct consequence of Einstein's relativity. Events that are simultaneous for one observer are not simultaneous for another observer in relative motion, and there is no way to tell which observer is right, because both are equally correct. Think about what this means. If you start walking in one direction, what counts as Andromeda's present changes. You literally change which slice of Andromeda's spacetime is simultaneous with you here and now, simply by changing your state of motion. If you walk towards Andromeda, the present of Andromeda that is simultaneous with you jumps into the future of Andromeda. If you walk away from Andromeda, the present simultaneous jumps into the past of Andromeda. And this change can be thousands of years depending on how fast you walk. This seems impossible. It seems to violate every intuition about how reality should work. But it is an inevitable mathematical consequence of the fact that the speed of light is constant for all observers, and it has been verified experimentally in every way we can imagine. What this means is that the concept of present, of now, is fundamentally relative and dependent on the observer. It is not an objective property of the universe, but rather a characteristic of your particular perspective within the universe. Physicists like Brian Greene use this to argue that if the present is relative, then all moments must exist equally, because there is no universal privileged present that separates what exists now from what no longer exists or does not yet exist. If different observers have different presents that are all equally valid, then all moments must exist simultaneously in the timeless structure of the block universe. This greatly strengthens the case for the block universe and makes it much more difficult to maintain the intuitive view that only the present really exists, while the past and future are somehow less real. But many people, when faced with this, simply refuse to accept it. Say there must be something wrong with the physics or the logic or the interpretation, because the alternative that the present you are experiencing now is no more real or privileged than any other moment in the past or future is emotionally intolerable for many people. Tyson tells stories of lectures where he explains all this clearly with analogies and examples, and at the end people come up to him and say, "But I feel the present. I know now is different from yesterday or tomorrow. How can physics say that my direct experience is wrong?" And your answer is always the same. Your experience is not wrong. You do experience a present, but that present is a feature of your consciousness moving through the temporal dimension. It is not a fundamental property of the universe itself, and confusing the map of your experience with the territory of physical reality is a mistake humans constantly make because our intuition evolved to survive on the savannah, not to understand relativity. Now consider what this means for concepts like causality. We normally think that causes precede effects in time, that the past influences the future, but the future cannot influence the past. But if all moments exist equally in the block universe, then in what sense does the past cause the future? The causal relationship is embedded in the structure of space-time, but it is not a temporal creation relationship where the past literally brings the future into existence. It is more like a mathematical correlation between different slices of the four-dimensional block. Some physicists like Julian Barber have gone even further and proposed that time does not exist at all, not even as a dimension of the block universe, that what we call time is just change and correlation between different possible states of the universe, and that the fundamental structure of reality is timeless, consisting only of instantaneous configurations without any true flow or movement. This is a minority view, but it is based on serious attempts to reconcile general relativity with quantum mechanics and create a quantum theory of gravity. And if it is correct, it would mean that literally everything you experience as temporal change is emergent and not fundamental. That at the deepest level, the universe does not flow or evolve, but simply is like a timeless mathematical landscape of all possible configurations simultaneously. Do these discoveries about the nature of time have any practical application, or are they just philosophical abstractions? Surprisingly, they are absolutely essential to modern technology. Without understanding special and general relativity, we could not have functioning GPS systems, because satellites in orbit experience time differently to us on the surface due to both motion and the weaker gravitational field. And if we did not continually correct for these temporal differences, positioning errors would accumulate at the rate of approximately 10 kilometers per day, making GPS completely useless. Every time you use GPS navigation on your cell phone, you are relying on relativistic corrections for time dilation. You are using technology that is, it only works because we understand that time does not flow uniformly, but depends on movement and gravity. Future astronomical gravitational wave experiments are revealing new aspects of how space-time behaves when distorted by cataclysmic events like black hole collisions. And understanding the dynamic nature of space-time is essential for interpreting these observations and learning about the universe. At quantum scales, experiments continue to explore the role of time in quantum processes, and there is hope that we will eventually understand how to reconcile the relativistic view of time as a dimension with the quantum view of time as an external parameter in relation to which systems evolve. This reconciliation would be a crucial step towards a quantum theory of gravity that would unify our understanding of the very small with our understanding of the very large. So let me now bring all of this together and explore why this truth about time that Neil deGrasse Tyson reveals is simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Why so many people resist it, but why accepting it can fundamentally transform how you live your life. The revelation is this: time is not what you think. The present is not special. The flow you experience is an illusion created by your limited consciousness navigating through a timeless four-dimensional reality where all moments exist equally, and you are not a persistent entity traveling through time, but rather a pattern distributed along the temporal dimension like a four-dimensional worm stretching from birth to death. Why is this liberating? Because it frees you from the illusion that the past is gone and the future does not yet exist. It allows you to see your life as a timeless totality where every moment you lived has permanent and equal reality. Your childhood joys still exist in those temporal slices. Your moments of love and discovery and wonder still exist and will always exist embedded in the fabric of space-time. Nothing is truly lost because everything is always present in its respective temporal location. It allows you to see death not as annihilation, but as the termination of the extension of your temporal worm in the future direction. But all the parts that once existed continue to exist. It allows you to stop lamenting so much about the past that is already fixed and unchanging in the fabric of space-time, and the future that in a sense already exists, and instead focus on fully experiencing the frame of reality that your consciousness is inhabiting at this moment, knowing that this moment is as real and permanent as any other. Why is it terrifying? Because it destroys the comfortable illusion of control and agency. If the future already exists, then your choices have in some ways already been made. If free will is illusory or compatibilist, then the feeling that you could have done differently is questionable. If your identity is just a narrative constructed by connecting temporal slices, then the self you think you are may be much more fragmented and illusory than you imagined. And if there is no shared universal present, then the connection you feel with other people in this moment may now be much more tenuous and relative than it intuitively seems. But here's what Neil deGrasse Tyson always emphasizes. The fact that these truths are disturbing doesn't make them any less true. And there is profound beauty in confronting reality as it is rather than as we wish it were. There is beauty in realizing that you are part of a four-dimensional structure vastly richer and more complex than the one-dimensional flow you consciously experience. There is beauty in understanding that the laws of physics treat all moments democratically, without privileging present over past or future. There is beauty in recognizing that the universe was not constructed to make sense to African primates, but that these primates nevertheless developed mathematics and physics and experiments powerful enough to glimpse the true nature of reality, even when it completely contradicts their evolved intuitions. And if these discoveries blew your mind as much as they blew mine, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because we have many more mysteries of the universe to unravel together. Many more revelations that will transform how you see reality. Much more fascinating science that shows that the real universe is infinitely stranger and more wonderful than any fiction. Think about this. You exist in a universe where time is relative, where simultaneity is observer-dependent, where past, present, and future coexist timelessly, where your identity is distributed along a dimension that you can only experience one moment at a time, where the arrow of time emerges from increasing entropy, but the fundamental laws are reversible. Where every decision you make may already exist in a future slice of space-time, but is still your decision emerging from your own thought processes, and where death is not annihilation, but merely the end of the extension of your timeline, leaving all previous parts to exist permanently. It's dizzying, it's disturbing, but it's absolutely fascinating, and it's the universe you actually live in, whether your intuition can accept it or not. The future of physics will likely reveal even stranger truths about time when we finally get a working quantum theory of gravity, when we understand how time emerges or does not emerge at Planck scales, where the geometry of space-time itself can become granular and quantum, when we discover whether time actually exists as something fundamental or whether it is merely emergent from deeper processes not yet understood. But even with what we already know, even with just special and general relativity and thermodynamics and the basic implications of the block universe, we already know enough to say definitively that time is not what you thought it was, that the present you are experiencing now is neither universally shared nor fundamentally privileged, and that the structure of reality is far richer and stranger than common sense could ever suggest. Neil deGrasse Tyson has dedicated his career to communicating these truths in an accessible way because he believes that people deserve to know how the universe really works, deserve to have their minds expanded by genuine discoveries rather than being fed comfortable but false simplifications, and deserve to experience the authentic wonder that comes from confronting the cosmos as it really is, in all its counterintuitive, mathematically elegant glory. So the next time you look at a clock, think about what that device is actually measuring. It is not measuring the flow of some Newtonian universal absolute time. It is measuring your personal journey through the temporal dimension, counting the seconds of your local experience of duration in your own particular frame of reference. And the time it tells is genuinely different from the time that other clocks mark in other frames of reference. And all of these different times are equally real and equally correct. The next time you recall the past, realize that you are not accessing something that has ceased to exist. You are mentally reconstructing a representation of events that still exist permanently in previous slices of the four-dimensional structure of space-time. And your memory is less like watching a recording, and more like creating a new work of art loosely inspired by the original. Next time you plan for the future, consider that perhaps you are not creating possibilities but figuring out which of the already existing future slices your stream of consciousness will inhabit. Or perhaps you are doing both simultaneously in a strange dance between determinism and agency that physics does not yet fully understand. And the next time you feel anxiety about the passage of time, about aging, about lost opportunities, about the impermanence of precious moments, remember that in the timeless structure of space-time, nothing really passes. All the moments you have lived exist permanently in their respective four-dimensional coordinates. And although your consciousness continues to move into new temporal slices, experiencing the flow of aging and change, the versions of you in past moments continue to exist forever, forever young. In those moments, forever experiencing those joys, in those particular points of your temporal worm. This doesn't make the loss any less painful, it doesn't make the death any less real in its finality for the future extension of your timeline, but it does offer a different, perhaps consoling perspective that in some deep sense nothing is truly lost because everything always exists somewhere in the block universe. The truth about time that Neil deGrasse Tyson reveals is difficult to accept because it so completely contradicts our most basic intuitions about reality. But it is precisely because it contradicts our intuitions that it is worth accepting, because it reminds us that the universe was not meant to make sense to us. We are the ones who had to develop mathematical and experimental tools powerful enough to make sense of the universe. And when we do so, we discover that reality is far more wonderful and strange than anything our evolved intuitions could anticipate. You are living in a four-dimensional universe where time is a geometric dimension, where simultaneity is relative, where all moments coexist timelessly, and where you are a distributed structure across that temporal dimension, experiencing one frame at a time. And that is absolutely extraordinary and deserves to be contemplated with all the wonder you can muster. Because you have had the absurd evolutionary luck to develop a mind capable of not only existing in this universe, but of understanding it, at least partially. And this understanding, although disturbing, is one of the greatest gifts that science can offer.